Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you guys for joining us on our webinar Wednesday series. My name is Keith Morris with PDSVISION, and today I'm going to be talking about the Freestyle tool functionality that is within Creo. It's heavily used a lot for industrial designs. So just a little bit about myself. I am a technical specialist here with PDSVISION. My background is in 3D design, additive manufacturing, and animation and rendering. So just a brief introduction about PDSVISION. We were formerly Boundary Systems and are the first PTC global reseller and preferred services provider. And we have some functionalities and capabilities with consulting, professional training, cloud, and help desk. Just a brief timeline here. Boundary Systems was started in 2006, and in 2018 was acquired by Boundary Systems. These are some of our partners, PTC obviously being the big one, but we also, just to name a few of the others, Moldex 3D, ZW CAD, and Keyshot. These next couple slides, I'm going to briefly touch on the digital thread concept. This is an approach to PTC software that you integrate into your workflow, and with other individual applications, where and how they're utilized in the manufacturing process. This is another example of that thread, all the way from the design stage to the built stage, and even all the way through the maintain stage, and where that thread fits in with your functionalities. This leads to reduced time and reduced time to market. It reduces downtime and also costs. So I'm going to hit some points here on the Freestyle tool before we get into the demo part of this. It is used to create conceptual designs using freeform modeling and sculpting versus traditional boundary blends and building quilts or patches. You use push and pulling and forming using the faces, the vertices, and the edges of the model itself. So you're taking the model and forming it itself. There's no building curves or edges or patches and patching those together. You start with a basic shape and start to model it from there. Beyond that, it can be made a solid, and other features can be added to it as well. I'd like to point this out now. Freestyle models are not within of themselves parametric, but you can integrate the model with parametric assemblies if needed. Keep in mind the Freestyle tool is really best used for design concepts that you want to be more flushed out and have a finished look to them, more so than using them necessarily for parametric assemblies or parts. This also saves a lot of time and is ideal for designs that are particularly ergonomic and organic. So this tool, that's the main benefit of this tool. You don't have to spend time building the edges or curves and patches. You can just work directly with a model. I have a few examples here of kind of a start to finish. On the left image, you are able to bring in a reference picture of something that you're building. It could be a sketch even, and you can start to build a model around that. So you can see sort of this wireframe going around, modeling roughly around the car. There's this car seat. And in the end, you can you end up with a finished model here in the middle, or a finished design, or it could even be a first draft. You can always go back and change your freestyle model, but you eventually get to this point where you have a finished, sculpted, and formed model. The image on the right is a render from Keyshot, which is heavily used for marketing purposes and also gives the design team a chance to apply textures or materials or colors and set it up in a scene with proper lighting. So I will briefly touch on that at the very end. So I just wanted to show you kind of what this process looks like. All right, so you can find the Freestyle tool within Creo here, where the other surfaces, the surfaces group is. You'll see the big boundary blend, which some of you may have seen in the past. And then to the right of that, if you have the ISDX extension, you'll see the style tool in the middle here. I'll briefly touch on that just a little bit as well later on. And then right below that, the Freestyle tool is right at the bottom. So I just wanted to point out where that is. It could be easily missed among all the other tools here in the ribbon. But what I have here is a car seat that I sculpted and made, basically just starting with cubes. I'll show you how I got to this stage just by starting with those simple shapes. Before I do that, I also wanted to point out this design exploration session. This gives you a checkpoint tree where you can, when you start the model, you have it at its very beginning stages, and as you're progressing, you can save it as checkpoints. So you can go back and look at certain stages of your design, and it also shows you as the designer the progression of the model. So this is very good to keep track of how it's progressing and coming along. You would set that up through your managed session and going to design exploration session and then hitting start. And then from there, you'd be able to each save after that. Instead of doing file save, right here, there's a checkpoint and a save icon that allows you to save. Okay, once you have the start point, you manipulate it some and then you save it, and that automatically becomes the next checkpoint and so forth. So just wanted to point that out, that this is very good to use when, especially if you have more detailed designs, and this checkpoint tree could look even longer. What I like about this is you could add more than, as you're adding more freestyle parts or shapes in there, it'll automatically save those as well within the session, the design exploration session. So this is a design I'm fairly happy with, at least at this point. It could change later, it may change down the road, but for now I'm happy with this. But I'll show you what it looked like at the very beginning. Not the very beginning, excuse me. I did say I started with some cubes, so I'll show you how to how to get started with the very beginning of this. But I just wanted to show you, this was my first stage in this, to where it doesn't have a lot of detail. My main concern was getting the base shape down. You can see, so I'm going to go to my model tree and actually hide this. So there's the reference image I have in here. It is not, it's obviously not exactly like this, but I was just more concerned with the shape of the car seat rather than the exact shape of this image per se. You can do this, some of you may know this, but you guys can do this through if I have the view tab selected and I go under model display, I could go to images, and then this allows me to hit import and select my reference plane. For this, I chose the right datum plane. And then once you chose that, you select your image in the browser, and then you can bring it in. So it's important to note that like this is a good thing to start with, because this could even be a sketch, that like a finalized like sketch that you have as well. So you can bring those sketches in. You could also bring in more than one view as well. So if I wanted the front of this, I would do the same thing, and select the front datum plane to have both of those line up. So as you're modeling around this this sketch or this image, you'll have both views in there. So under here, I'm gonna just, I already have what I started there, but I'm gonna show you how this starts from the very beginning under the Freestyle tool. In the top left here under shapes is where I have what I can choose to start with. Under closed primitives is where you have your three-dimensional shapes to start with: sphere, a cylinder, a torus, or a cube. In this case, I started with a cube. Just some of you may have heard, I don't know if any of you have ever heard the term of box modeling, but that just means I'm taking it's in its most rough form and only concerned with the overall main shape. So if I take this cube, I'm going to start to show you how to manipulate these shapes. There's a manipulation group up here under transform. So there's transform and there's scale. And I'll show you what this brush is in a little bit as well. But for now, just getting this base shape, I'm going to be switching back and forth a lot between transform and scale. So if I go here into my right view, I could even turn on wireframe here. I'm going to switch to scale. I could just drag this cube down and kind of just get this in place a little bit. Again, I'm only concerned with overall shape. And I actually move it back here. I can rotate it like this, kind of get this in place. Another thing I wanted to point out is I can create a mirror. So where one side will affect the other. So what I'm going to do is actually, again, you're working with faces, edges, and vertices on these shapes. So here's the faces, here's the edges, and here's the points. Sometimes it's easier to change your selection filter to just one of them. So if I switch it to just face, I don't have to worry about any of those interfering with each other. What I'm going to do first is split this in half though. So if I select an edge, and so getting into some of these tools under your create group, I use this edge split a lot in the very beginning stages of designing, because you're creating edges as you need them, and it keeps the mesh in a very low tessellation at first. And then later on, if you need an overall subdivision, there's a subdivide tool as well. So with this edge selected, I'm going to split it, and now it's going to split the model in half. This will allow me to delete these faces out of here because I'm just going to end up mirroring it. And before I mirror it, what I also like to do, I'm going to make sure I'm on edge here. Go to my front view, and I'm going to select this half of edges because I want it to align. I'm going to choose align normal. I'm going to choose the right plane, and now it's aligned normal to that. That allows it to keep seamless in the middle, so there's no seam and there's no split as I mirror this. So once I have that, I'm going to choose the shape under the Freestyle tool here, and I'm going to hit this mirror tool, and I'm going to choose the right datum plane. It wants me to Back up here. Unlink that. There we go. So anything I do to this shape on the right side will then be mirrored over. So this extrude functionality under the create group is something you're going to be using quite heavily for this as you're modeling. So now it looks kind of funky right now, and that's because under this crease group, you have to make sure as you're extruding how you want the hard or soft setting. So that means if I turn that hard value all the way up and then the soft value down here, switch it back to hard here. And I also want to make sure I delete that face there in the middle. And then I can continue on and start to get the rest of this shape. I'm going to drag that in. By default, as you're moving edges and faces, it automatically kind of has this smooth bend or this smooth transition. That's totally up to what the design looks like and what your preference is. It doesn't have to be that, but it can be. I'll do another extrude back here, and actually I'm going to rotate this up a little bit. I'll extrude this side. I'll delete the face in the middle. It stays attached. And you can do this likewise with edges to smooth out the edges as well. So if I wanted this kind of a more of a hard bend right there, and we'll worry about the smoothness later. Switch this back to face. And I'm quickly just forming this model. I'm not overly concerned with details yet. You have to start very basic and very just worry about the overall shape first. I'm gonna split this again. I have to select the edge to make sure I do an edge split. Actually, I'm gonna just drag this back a little bit and then extrude that face up so I can start to get the back seat. One thing I wanted to point out too, so if I extrude this right now, it's going to go in the direction of this arrow. There's two functions you can do for this translator by hovering over the middle. There's reposition and relocate. Relocate, I'll show you a little later. But if I check reposition, this allows me to move the translator without affecting the way without affecting that face. And then if I click it again and uncheck it and I hit extrude, you can see I can start to pull and push this up. I could even go up all the way if I wanted to, at least up into the headrest point, kind of like this. Again, the center face, I'm going to delete that. You know, this edge, I might want to smooth that out a little more, or not smooth it out, but make it a little. Do that. I'm doing that on purpose because I'm going to worry about the smoothness and the roundness of things later. I'm not concerned with that right now. You know, this edge, I could add another split and kind of take the front of it and push it out some like that. Drag it down maybe like this. Starting to get this. So you can see I'm starting to get this shape. Obviously, the seat would be wider than this. So I could take all the outside faces and simply just push it out like that. So it's just the base. Again, I might sound like a broken record, but again, this is just basic shape. I'm not overly concerned with the look of it yet. So that's how I started the base shape and how I ended up with this in the beginning. And that's just what I worked with. So I eventually came to a point where I started to add a little more detail to this as well. So you can see I did a subdivision, and I I did a subdivision, and then I started to sculpt some more from there. So if I wanted to go in here and start getting some of that detail now, there's a lot more faces to choose from, which could be a little more time consuming to select. So with this brush tool, I have this select option right here, and I'm going to change the size of the brush. I have face. You might need to reset it. There we go. And I'm selecting groups of faces. If I hold control, I can continue to select groups of faces, just depending how much I want. So I have that right there. You know, and if I want to transform this, I want to show you the relocate option on this translator right here. So if I hold that down, hit relocate, I could pick any reference really. I'm gonna select this face in the middle here, and I'm also gonna reposition it a little bit down that way, and we're good there. So I could start to drag this out like this, and I could start to get some you know, finer definition. If I, you know, select less faces than that, you can see I'm pulling in. I'll go on the other side here and turn this and turn the edges off. You can see I'm pushing and pulling, and then I could create like an indentation there. I could do the same with edges and get more, start to get some, at this point, start to get maybe more stylized features. I'm messing with that hardness and softness crease, like I could push this up, switch to soft, and then maybe drag that down some, and you know, mess with, you know, with the look of the model. So you can start to get a lot of those details. And now at this point, I'm starting to get a little more detail. So I'm gonna cancel out of this here and go back to. So then I got to a point where I joined the, not technically, but the mirror, I chose to align this right side to the center plane, and then I had to re-add the mirror, and then now I got this seamless, I don't have a seam down the middle, I don't have a split, and it's joined together, but the mirror is still there. So I could go back into this, still at this point, and still manipulate these surfaces. One other thing I want to show you in this create group is this face split. So if I select the face here, and I'm going to fold it out, there's different percentages of it. It insets another face within it. And what this allows me to do is it could be an indentation for a button or something else. So I'll show you guys. I'll do like 25%. Kind of move this in a little bit. Again, using this crease functionality to get a harder or softer edge, depending what you want. You can see it a little better on this side. That. So it just depends, you know, how you know, if I wanted a button, I wanted something, another shape to go within there, you know, that face split is a nice functionality to have within this as well. So I was going along here, you can see I had these groups of faces selected, and I actually used the scale tool to bring it in, and then I was able to get this crease right here along this edge right here. So once I was fairly, there's a point where I do manipulate the back seat a little bit more, but I kind of put that on the back burner, and I moved on to the next thing I wanted to do, which was the plastic panels at the back and on the bottom side here. Obviously, you can see they're, especially with the side panel. This I just started with the cube, and you can see there's different freestyle shapes within the model tree. This two. I eventually renamed them, but this one is the side panel. And if I go in there, and I'll just show you, all it is was this middle cube and two extrudes just to get the base shape down. And then I'm just what I like about this is that I can model around or over the existing or the first model. So you can have as many freestyle features in the model tree as you need. Because I wanted it to be these plastic panels to be a separate mesh. So that's just how I started with this one. I started with the cube and another cube at the back. And this one I didn't do the align or I didn't do the align or final mirror yet. So with this one, you know, if I go back in to edit this one, you know, I'll continue to do it. I'll add an edge there, drag it down. I'll do another one here. And now I can start to manipulate, you know, around the seat as it's going along like this. I'll do another edge split here. Another one here. And now you can see where I could use why I create those edges on the fly instead of just subdividing the whole thing. I save that subdivision for when I'm ready to move on to the next level and I need it to be more smoothed out all over. Adding the edges individually is just for me to create, you know, the design as I'm going along. So that's what this allows for. I'll show you what that looks like, by the way. So if I wanted to, you know, this wouldn't be done yet, but if I wanted to, let's say I add an edge along here, I can control select these edges here. Again, I want to relocate this to, and it could be a point too. It doesn't have to be an edge. I could relocate it to that. So you just lift up here like that. And then I would use the subdivision tool. I'll go into this next point here. So now as I added edges and modeled along, you can still see it's still pretty low tessellation right there. In order to do it, I have to select the shape and then hit subdivide, and then it'll split all of those faces all the way around into 4. So it basically multiplies it by 4. So it looks smoother, so it doesn't look as rough as it is right now. But if I'm happy with the overall shape, I could subdivide it, and then as you're getting higher tessellation, that's when you're probably going to look into instead of adding one edge at a time, you'd be looking into more so just pushing and pulling groups of faces and groups of edges or vertices. So we cancel out on that. And I eventually do the same thing with the back seat here. There's one more change. This is where I kind of put the pause on the panels and went back to the seat. And then I was able to kind of I just wanted to make the seat look tighter. I wanted it to be not as bulky at the back. So I went back to the model and after a subdivision, I was able to select some of these edges and move it in and push and pull around groups of faces to get it in tighter. So it just didn't look so bulky at the back. And then you also notice with the side and the back panel, I brought those in to be a little more conformed to the seat, because obviously this still has to fit within a certain space. And usually those panels aren't overly bulky anyway. So I could go, if I were to continue this and add buttons, I would probably use that I would be using the face split to make indentations, and then maybe add another freestyle shape to do some buttons. And then all I did at the end here was mirror that along the right plane and put it on this side as well. So yeah, I went from cubes to this just by all of those functionalities I showed you in the tools there. You can get more in depth with some of those tools as depending on what your design is and how detailed it could be. But I was able to make this significantly quicker than just using boundary blends or using the ISDX tool if that's something you guys have. Speaking of the ISDX tool, I wanted to show you guys how you can take this design into the interactive surface design extension to where if you have a team of engineers you work with, they may be more familiar with that tool and building curves and surfaces instead of this method in the Freestyle tool. So I'm just going to show you a quick example of that. What I'm going to do is build some curves and a surface that starts to model or build over this geometry that already exists from the Freestyle model. So what I did first was I published this geometry from this main car seat right here, and I already have it set up, but to do that I'm going to have this main seat here selected, and under this model intent I go to publish geometry, and then I'm going to change my selection filter to quilt, and I'm going to control select both of those halves of that. I'm just going to cancel out of this here real quick. Once I do that, you'll see it come down here in publish geometry. It gives it an ID number. From there, I create a new part and I name it whatever would fit within your naming scheme. So that's what this is right here. I have it brought in here already, but obviously it's going to be blank since it's a new part. So under this get data group right here, I'm going to hit copy geometry. But when I do that, I'm going to open the main part that it started with. So there's the car seat there, and then the published geometry shows up when I select. It'll show up in a small window over here in the right-hand corner. So I have this. Hit OK. Publish geometry reference. I'm going to select the seat right here. Then when I hit OK, you'll see it show up in the graphics window right here. But since I already have it, now I have this brought from the Freestyle model. So what I'm going to do is start a new style feature. So this is the interactive surface design extension. If that is not there in your interface, that means you do not have that extension. So this is under the assumption that you do have this. Most of our users have this functionality. So I'm going to start a new style feature here. It'll show up here in the model tree, and you'll see this plane show up. This is our active plane in which we're gonna and where you want to draw the curves. So in this case, I'm going to switch the active plane to front. So I'm going to hit set active plane. I'm going to choose front, and then it'll change it there. So once I have that, I can then start building a network of curves. So this is similar to, if your engineers typically work with boundary blends, this is actually a very similar interface as boundary blends. You have your curves and what you can do with them. You have the ability to create a surface once you have 3 or more curves. And then you'll also have your surface functionalities like surface connect, editing it, surface trim. The idea here is that we're doing this to build and model over this current geometry. So to do that, we first need our curve. So I'm just going to select that. I'm going to leave it as a free curve here on the front plane. I'm going to go into my view here. In order to get this curve started, I'm just going to make a straight line from here to about here. And I'm going to hit OK. So this is a free curve, and it only has 2 points. I'm going to switch to my right side here. I could go back and edit this definition. to add more points. So I'm gonna hit add midpoint, and I'm just gonna pretty much follow this geometry here. I'm gonna add another point here, and then I could edit this curve around the model. All right, so there's my first curve. I'm gonna do another one that's gonna go along. That's eventually gonna go along this edge right here. I'm gonna switch this active plane to the right side actually. To about there. Okay. So I switch back to the front there. Edit the definition of this curve. Add another point. And I'll add another point here. Get that shape there. There we go. So now we have that, and then I gotta add one more here. So I'm gonna actually switch to the top plane. And I'm just gonna draw, I gotta make sure I'm getting this. Shift there, shift there. All right, and then within that, I'm gonna hit OK. Go back and edit this so I can add some points to it. Drag it out to about right there. I'll add one here. Cool. So this is just the beginning of this, but now that I have my three curves here, I can build a surface with these curves. So I'm gonna select my first one here, second one here, and my third one here. It'll build a surface, and I'm gonna hide this geometry out of the way. And now we have a surface that starts to model over. So this is a patch or a quilt. Some of you may call it patch. I'll call it quilt because that's what it's called in Creo. But now I have the start of this car seat, starting with the headrest, to model over using the ISDX tool. So that's really good functionality for people that are, for your engineers that may be used to working in this sort of tool versus starting with a model. So you guys can work together as a team, as both designers and engineers, using both the Freestyle and then having your engineers working over that model using the ISDX tool or boundary blends. So just real quick, I want to show you, this is the render from Keyshot. We were able to bring this in, and maybe this can always change later and look more detailed. Maybe in the future I want a thread texture on there. But I was able to do this by taking the panels and the seat and then the faces on this seat all have separate appearances within Creo. So when I export this, Keyshot will recognize and break that down as separate individual parts. So I actually have it up here already, and you can see, I'm going to turn on those two settings. It broke it down, and I was able to throw on like a matte plastic texture. This is sort of, and then the black is sort of this rubbery, sort of glossy texture. And then the same with I selected another texture within this as well. The reason I'm showing you a little bit of this Keyshot is because your designs often come to these renders, and that's what you typically want to show off to whoever you need to bring it to say, hey, instead of opening a Creo file and showing them the Freestyle model, you can bring it into KeyShot and use this for demonstration and marketing purposes as well. You can always go back and change anything on this Freestyle model and have it automatically update in KeyShot as well. So that's what this Freestyle tool allows you to do. And obviously, you know, it would take a lot more than 1 hour to show you building this thing from a cube to this point, but the tools I showed you within the Freestyle, the functionalities I showed you within there will allow you to create models like this for your design purposes. So with that being said, oops, it goes all the way to the beginning. With that being said, I will take any questions if you guys have any. You should have a chat area, and as I see these questions, I'll just answer to the group. And if there are questions in which I am not able to answer right now, I will be able to get back to you in the next day or two as well. So again, thank you for joining us today, and I'll take any questions. And if there's some long pauses, I'm just giving you guys time to ask any. So feel free to ask away. Daniel, you had 2 questions. Your first one, can you force the boundary edges onto a Boolean parametric model? So it's a hybrid of Freestyle and parametric modeling. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that you can bring it into parametric assemblies, but as far as other models that weren't created in Freestyle, I'll have to look further into that. And then you also asked, how do you know if the subdivision features do not intersect? That's why in the beginning of the modeling, I make sure that at the split, I'm deleting the inside faces where there's not a lot of tessellation. So for instance, if with the cube, I make, every time I'm extruding it, which extrusions in this case only for the car seat I used a few times. Each time I extruded, I made sure that inside face was deleted, so there was no intersecting later on when I subdivided it. And that way, and also when you complete the mirror, if there's no seam, that tells you that they're not intersecting. Let's see this next question here. Calvin, you mentioned at the beginning that this model has some difference between parametric models. Yeah, all I was saying actually at the beginning there is that when you're creating a model in Freestyle, it's not parametric. So that's basically what I meant. It's just saying that understand that this is not parametric within of itself. But it can, and that's why I mentioned it can be integrated into parametric assemblies though. You can still measure the models though, using the analysis tools. That's another quick way to check. If you wanted some sense of what the actual size is, you can still measure the Freestyle models, but they're not parametric within of themselves. James, you asked, can you shell that, add ribs, etc. So you're talking about once you're done with the Freestyle model, yes, you can. Not only can you shell it, you can apply a solidify. In fact, you have to do either one of those to even use the other features, to start to use some of the other modeling features, such as rounds, and ribs and things like that. So that is what's nice about when you're done with the Freestyle model itself, you can bring it back into the regular modeling space once it's solid, and then you can, go from there. Logan, what licenses have the Freestyle tool? I'll have to double check on this, but the Freestyle tool is I believe is part of the base Creo package, but I'm going to double check that. The ISDX is an additional is an extension, so that would be extra. So I just want to make that clear. Are the subs C always cubes, or do you have other shapes like box, cylinder, torus? The 4 shapes you have available are the 3-dimensional shapes. You have cube, sphere, torus, and cylinder. Logan, you're asking if can all file types be saved? Yeah, yes, you can export STP, IGS, OBJ with your Freestyle model. In fact, I brought it in as a step file within KeyShot, but you can export it as IGS and OBJ as well, and whatever Creo has available to export, you can export the Freestyle model as such. Well, I will end with that. Thank you guys again, and please feel free to join us on these frequently. I strongly encourage you guys to check our YouTube channel, which this webinar will be on. But there are several other webinars, and there is a handful of other webinars that do cover the ISDX tool, and there are some other webinars on KeyShot and Freestyle as well. So feel free to always check out that page. It's a great place for resources. And with that, thank you again, and you guys have a great rest of your day.